Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra metagame breakdown, the first one since the last big balance change patch, and we finally get an idea of how things are shifting and what the preliminary metagame looks like with this dataset. This is, as usual, based on the data dump by the mobalytics guys, mobalytics HQ. You can find the link to the two spreadsheets created by them in the description down below if you want to look at the full data and dive deeper than this video does, because as usual we're going to look at the top 5 most popular decks since the patch and the top 5 best performing decks that have the highest win rate. For that we will only be looking at decks with around 500 or more games played to keep the sample size as significant as possible and focus on like the more prominent decks, since obviously there will be fringe, barely played decks that have really high win rates that are very unrepresentative. Anyway, as you can see, for anyone that was following me the last couple days, my PC is back up and running, so I can finally bring you content again and also be streaming again from today on. So yeah, and shout out to the people that already donated to support my PC repair. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. And for anyone that also wants to help out, help me pay for the PC repair that I had to front from money that I don't really have, you can check the donation link in the description down below. I basically had to muster around 300 euros in repairs when I usually just barely have enough money to go from month to month. So any support from my followers and people that really enjoy my content is much appreciated, but obviously only if you want to and can afford to, no pressure. Just want to put it out there so people at least know about it. And before we dive into the content, you know the drill, hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the notification icon to not miss out on more Legends of Runeterra content in the future. And now it's finally time to dive into the metagame breakdown. Sorry for the long preamble this time. Lots to talk. Alright. Okay, so first, the most played deck currently by a huge margin is Bruised by God's Demacia midrange. He basically adapted the deck by just cutting the Rekindler that has become a bit too expensive, replace it with 2 denies, and just lean more heavily onto Citria the Bold by running 3 copies instead of 1 like before. Otherwise, the deck is basically untouched by the balance changes, possibly benefits from some of the stuff disappearing, and has proven to be a very real deck. Demacia has a lot of really strong good raid units, and this deck just makes very good use of it, and yeah, is one of the decks that people have been banking on now that some of the other archetypes have been nerfed or even killed off by the nerfs. So not too surprising here. Bruised by God I think hit rank 1 once or twice after the patch with this, and yeah, cemented it as one of the go-to decks after the patch. Second most played deck, way behind this one, is Spiders with Freljord, often with Iceborne Legacy, always with They Who Endure. The most popular version in the data set actually is without Iceborne Legacy, despite the deck being listed as Iceborne Spiders on the sheet. But as you can see, popularity is about half as much as the Demacia deck. So Demacia is like the clear frontrunner now. At least for now. These things will probably change in the coming weeks, but that's what we are looking at right now. This list is kind of interesting and a bit unconventional, with Lonely Poro, more champions than usual, some Splinter Souls, and more atrocities than usually to really lean into the They Who Endure part of the deck. The deck actually has a really good win rate, a much higher win rate than the overall archetype, so there might really be something here. The sample size is kind of small for this specific list, it's only 87 games, but the win rate is above 64% over those games, so take it with a grain of salt due to the sample size. But the overall archetype samples win rate is only 56.3%. So even if you adjust this and maybe it's closer to like 60, 95, 60%. It seems like this list might be notably better than a lot of the other lists. So make sure to give this version a try and see how it does and how it plays. I will certainly do that because the list looks pretty solid and pretty reasonable. So I'm curious to see how it plays out and performs. So we'll probably try that on one of the future streams. Anyway, on to the third most played deck. Third most played deck is Mage Seeker Lux, another deck that has benefited from the balance changes with the Mage Seeker rework and Flash of Brilliance change. Clearly pushing the 6+ cost spells matter archetype, but win rate rise, this is not doing very well. It is sitting pretty far up in terms of popularity, almost as popular as the Spiders deck, but the win rate is like barely above 51%. So it seems like even with those changes, Heimerdinger Lux is not doing that well. Arguably, the win rate is lower than it has been at other points in time on these data sets. Or at least this take on the current takes on the archetype are not ideal. I personally, for example, am not a big fan of Mage Seeker Insider, since it's just kind of a random beefy unit that the deck doesn't really care that much about. Not a big fan of unlicensed invention either. It's just kind of underpowered, and too many of these remembrance type effects isn't great. And I would probably just play Persuaders, maybe some Investigators, and otherwise stay more to the true to the typical Lux Heimerdinger core. Also probably a mistake not to run Campunks. Card is just good, and there's no reason not to run it. So I would probably stay closer to something that what I have on my mobalytics if you want to check that out. There's my latest version that I have been talking about with Raptor, with Josh Adderlayton, and incorporates various elements from both of us that we like about the archetype, and he has been a fairly big fan of the deck. And I updated it with the latest changes, basically. Alright, anyway, on to the fourth most popular deck. Fourth most popular archetype is Azrael Karma. This has risen to prominence recently due to someone hitting rank 1. I couldn't remember or find the name before recording the video. So if you remember, let me know in the comments down below. But yeah, this is a new take on the Azrael combo deck that is now a bit more appealing, with Troop of Elnox being nerfed and Flash of Brilliance playing a little worse in a Heimerdinger version of that. But yeah, still not sure if it's here to stay or if the Freeze version will come back, or even the Draven Nox version will take over again. But for now, this is very popular and doing pretty well. So although in terms of win rate, it's only solid. Like, it's at 56.4%, which is not bad by any means, but not like a premium win percentage either. So yeah, and in 5th place we have Burn. Burn has been hanging around in like 4th or 5th place, most popular archetype, for a long time now. This version basically has dropped Teemo for Precious Pet, shaved a bit of the top end, like only one Chump Wump, for example, and it's just a bit more lean. I'm not too surprised that the deck is popular after a patch. When things are a bit wild and unsettled, decks like this thrive particularly well. And yeah, this list hasn't been changing much for a while, so not too surprised for this to be around and look the way it looks. It's just kind of a tried and true thing. Alright, next we're gonna move on to the top 5 highest win rate archetypes and see what has been doing well so far. So in 1st place we have also the most popular deck, which explains why it's so much more popular than anything else, because if you want to win, it seems this is what you should be playing. 63.8% win rate over 2,200 games is super impressive, and the highest win rate to sample size ratio that we had so far in any of these metagame breakdowns. So this is pretty impressive. We'll see how long this remains this way and where it stabilizes. I would assume it's going to go down a bit, but probably not that much. Maybe it's going to stabilize around like 60% or something. We'll have to see. And there's also still some room to see if there's a better splash than the deny. But for now, deny makes a lot of sense. Basically, the deck is a bit soft to ruination type decks, and deny covers that base really well, while against everything that's trying to just play to the board, play units, the deck is pretty well prepared with its very efficient challengers and good raid and utility. Next we have Kinku Elusives. They are still doing really well. They lost about 1% in win rate, which may be due to the changes to Conspirator, but might also just be variance. It's too early to say. We'll have to see if there's a trend long term. It has dipped in popularity for now due to the balance change, but in terms of performance, it really seems to just be doing about as well as it has been. If you remember, there was one time frame, 1 week, where we had a win rate a bit above 56% without any balance changes. So losing 1%, about 1% here after the balance changes might not even have to do with the balance changes. So it's really too early to say how much the balance changes mattered. They certainly matter in terms of popularity, as you can see, since people are trying different things and issuing it, thinking that it's worse without actually knowing. And the data so far indicates that it's still very good. Also, it probably benefits from maybe people playing more decks that are soft to it, like Demacia has a weakness to elusives and is like by far the most popular deck, as we saw, so that also might boost the win rate of elusives higher than it would be in a more diverse field. So there are a lot of things that still need to shake out and see how they settle. And yeah, I think with the nerf to Conspirator, I'm even more of a fan of the Nox Splash over the Freljord Splash, since Brothers Bond provides you with a decent amount of additional burst damage and like racing potential that now has gone down due to the Conspirator nerf and seems more needed. In third place, we have Karma Control. Not as popular anymore. The Rekindler nerf certainly mattered and hurt here, but the deck still seems to be a very solid option and has actually a higher win rate than at its peak popularity, which probably has to do with less mirror matches and less hostile metagame potentially. Next we have Burn. Burn made it in fourth place with a pretty high win rate for the archetype compared to like the average in the past. 57.5% is nothing to sneeze at, but like I said, not too surprising after a big shakeup that something like this, preying on people's experimenting, is doing well. We'll probably see that go down in the future. And then we have Azrael Karma here, just barely making it in with the 56.4% in fifth place. The win rates have been a lot more moderate, I would say, although they seem a bit more leveled out. Like if you look at the win rates, there are a lot more win rates, especially in the more popular decks, that are between 55 and 60, while in the past there were a fair share of decks that were very popular that had win rates below 55%. So once again, too early to say anything specific, but just something that I noticed, that the more popular decks, except for the Luxheimerdinger deck, which probably will just kind of drop off the map a lot in the next data set, they have all a win rate over 55%, which is something worth keeping an eye on. So yeah, Azrael Karma coming in here in fifth place, so it seems to be doing the best for now of the Azrael archetypes, and or the other Azrael archetypes not having a huge enough sample size to compete here. Like if I try and look at the other Azrael archetypes, the Freljord version actually has a high enough sample size with almost 800 games, but clocks in at just below 50%. Might be that people are still playing Elnux when they shouldn't, not sure. And then we have, let me see if I can find Nox Ezreal. Sample size is too small. Win rate is pretty high, like 59.2%, but it's like 174 games. So the win rate is higher than this, but the sample size is much lower. So the win rate might be like similar once you have a higher sample size and it levels out more. But yeah, this is the current metagame. I think there's still a lot of things to shake out and in flux, but Demacia is going strong and here to stay. So that's definitely one of the decks that you need to be able to beat. Once again, I think it might actually be a good time to jam some elusives, punish these Demacia decks, and see how well the deck can still do with a nerfed Conspirator. And I would assume it's weaker than before, but probably still a good deck. But like the close matchups now, where you like just barely won with Xaxis the turn before you lost, will now be lost much more, which is why I would assume in a more balanced field long term that the win percentage would probably be consistently lower than in the past, but we'll have to see. Maybe the metagame becomes more vulnerable to it as a result to the changes in its drop in popularity even long term, that while the nerf means a loss of power and therefore technically a reduction in win rate, that the other changes even it out, and it actually has the same like win rate in the format as before, or even slightly higher, because the format is more vulnerable to it. All right, this week it's we managed to be like quite a bit quicker with the walkthrough of the metagame breakdown, but it's kind of, we by now know all the decks and things aren't changing that much anymore. In terms of decks, it's just like a shifting around of the archetypes, but there's less to say about the decks themselves. Regardless, if you have any questions or any remarks, let me know in the comments down below. Let's have a conversation about what is going on in the metagame, what you think, how you feel about it, and so on and so forth. I'll be keeping these coming, and I'm curious to see how things change and settle with the next data set. I think the next one is going to be the more crucial one that's giving us a better idea how things will look more long term with the current balancing. All right, you know the drill. Hit the subscribe button down below. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to leave a like. And of course, share it with your friends, comment, and so on and so forth. And of course, please consider whitelisting YouTube on your adblock to help support us content creators in the easiest and free way possible. That's it again for this time. I'm your host, ManuS. I thank you for watching, and I see you next time.